number one source. Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Sports Card Nation podcast, episode 333. My favorite number is 3, so hopefully that bodes well for this episode. I think it will. We have two gentlemen on today's program, returning to the program. Been on more than once already, but the new film, The Diamond King, is set to release. It actually releases today, if you're listening to this on show podcast release day. It's officially out for viewing and downloading and purchasing. The Diamond King movie, obviously about artist extraordinaire Dick Perez, father of the Diamond King, and as I always tell him, the first person that made me think about another company other than Topps growing up in Brooklyn. And the director of that film, Marq Evans, both on the program again today. I want to talk about the process, and now that the finish line is met, what's next, the process that the film took, their traveling, their escapades, getting to know each other. We're just kind of putting a bow on it and celebrating the release of the movie. I saw it at the National. Now, if you did see it prior, the final cut, and you'll hear Mark talk about that, might be a little different than what you previously saw. Not immensely different, but maybe a few things might be different from the version that you might have already saw in a preview, whether that's at the National or some of the other locales that it did kind of give previews. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with Dick Perez and Marq Evans, and we'll talk about the film and the hobby.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.
All right, this is about, I believe, the fourth time I've had both of these gentlemen on the podcast, and doesn't matter, first, second, third, or in this case, fourth. Always excited to talk to these two gentlemen, and they got a new film coming out, and here on April 25th, The Diamond King. I'm joined by Director Marq Evans, and the subject of that film, the hobby icon, as I like to call him, along with a few others, but definitely earns that title, Mr. Dick Perez. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, John. Thanks for having us. Good to see you.
So, like I said, April 25th, this has been a kind of a 2 to 3 year process. I had you on the show 2 years ago. I know, Mark, for you, the idea started about 3 years ago, and now, I know on a previous show I mentioned it's kind of like your baby, and then it gets born and then it grows, and here we are, right, 3 years later, and you've had some premieres, like showings but the final cut version premiere is April 25th. Kind of talk about this process for you as a filmmaker over this 3 year that it's been a thing.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's been the most enjoyable process of any film that I've made. And most of that is just working with Dick, number one. Just love the guy, so that's been super enjoyable. And then the subject matter of baseball, my favorite sport, and the paintings, we're being able to work with, tell the story, his story, and the story of baseball through his work, which I've been such a fan of. So process wise, which ultimately is the only thing we can really control, is having fun with the process, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun sharing the sneak peeks of the film, which we started last summer at the National in Cleveland, at Sabre in Minneapolis. We screened it at the theater in Cooperstown at the Hall of Fame, at the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, and then the official world premiere, because those were kind of these sneak peeks, was in Palm Springs in January at the film festival there. And so every step of the way, it's been awesome sharing it with people and sharing Dick's story. And now, like you said, April 25th, it'll be available for anybody, anywhere to watch online, at home. So we're very excited for that, and having, anybody that wants to see it. You don't have to be at a certain, city or location to see it now. So that's exciting.
Dick, your journey in this process too, as being sort of the subject of a film. I don't imagine you really thought this would be something that would happen, and yet here you are with the the final premiere here, April 25th. Your kind of thoughts as being the subject of. I mean, you've watched movies before, but to be the subject of one, like kind of what's that like? What has this process been like for you?
Well, during the creating of the Diamond Kings, I never really got any backflow of emails, letters, what have you. And I thought I was just doing it out there. And I knew that the company was having a great time with its sales. But the people that I was aiming the art and my project to, somebody who I would think would say, nice work. But it turns out that most of them were young, and it took them growing up. Mark is one of those guys. And it took them growing up, and I don't know how many thousands requests for autographs I get a month, but it's just the dream.
Has that I'm guessing the answer is yes, but has that number increased since this film has kind of launched? As more people maybe aware of the man behind the genius artwork? Would that be the case? It's probably a safe bet.
Are you asking?
Yeah, are you getting more of those requests because of the film?
I'm getting letters that say, I loved your work when I was a kid. I am now collecting with my kid, whether it be a girl or a boy, and we're sharing your work. I'm sharing my the work with them. Letters like that. I mean, I've had letters from a guy's sadness. His son was terminal, and he was spending a lot of time with him with my work. Yeah. So I thought I was and then he sent me a picture of his son and told me when he had passed. But there were some very personal things that I've got. I got one from a guy in prison who had served 28 years and had 68 to go, and I had to say, that's got to be murder. It's got to be. Yeah. The guy's in there for a long time, and he was honest and told me why he wanted to sign up this stuff so he can sell and get cigarettes. So
well, at least he was a straight shooter there,
yeah,
and
exactly.
didn't make up kind of a baloney story just to get some
exactly.
Dick Perez audio. Well, I said this previously. I've said this on the show without you guys present, right? Like for me, I'm a Brooklyn kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and so Topps was everything from an early age. And it was your Diamond King, Dick, that would really, the first couple years of Donruss and even Fleer were no great shakes, to be blunt honest. And so it didn't sway me too much from Topps, but it was that first Diamond King I saw that I'm like, what's this? This is so different. And it doesn't have Topps on it. Doesn't have those 5 letters that I'm overly familiar with. And the rest is history. And I think for a lot of people, they probably from that era that they have similar stories. And while the cards themselves are all works of art, when it comes to photography, this was art, pure art, and really turned my head, and obviously many others. And that's a credit to you. And it makes you wonder, like you can't rewrite history, but maybe had that not been the case, maybe how would the hobby be even a little bit different, or maybe would it took longer for that brand to make its presence known. Going back to Mark, you've done films before. You've won awards for prior films. In comparison, how was this film different for you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, it was different for me in several ways, and a lot of those ways I intended from the beginning to do. Which one of them was I wanted to find a movie that I could do within a couple years. My previous couple films had been like 5-year projects, and I also wanted to find a film that I thought I could do that I'd really enjoy the process and not need for lack of better terms, like the Hollywood system. I wouldn't have to wait on other production companies or a lot of outside organizations to finance it or something like that. So when I thought of this idea and realized that I could make this, that I was interested in the subject of Dick Perez and the story of his story and the story of baseball through his work, I originally thought maybe I'll just interview Dick. He'll be the only interview. I've got a couple favorite documentary filmmakers, and they've made films like that before, because that's one way you can keep the cost down, because you're not traveling all over the world or all over the country interviewing people. Ultimately, I did do some other interviews. I think there's 5 other interview subjects, including Dick's wife, Lou, because I was inspired by their love story, really. So she's interviewed. John Thorne, the official historian of Major League Baseball, is interviewed. Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum. Peggy Steele, who was, along with Frank Steele, partners in the Perez Steele business. And Bill Madden as well, too, Hall of Fame sports writer. Am I missing anybody? I think those were our interviews. So ended up with but still just a handful of interviews. And so that just being a little bit more strict with that, I enjoyed that process and just kind of made it a little bit tighter. There's not so many voices in the film where you can't keep track of, who the interview subjects are. And then the other thing that we were able to put together in this was an idea that I had for other films, but it never really made sense, which was to have an on-camera narrator that kind of tied some of the story together, but also in this case was like the voice of baseball. And so what I wanted that to be was a chance for some written material to be done about baseball, but really as an opportunity to show off more of Dick's work. So whenever this narrator's on camera, we have these massive screens that we built that are projecting images of Dick's work. So you see all kinds of Dick's work throughout the film through his story, but then in these on-camera narration components, again, it's an excuse to show more of his work and tell more stories about baseball that ultimately tie in with Dick's stories as well, too. So we had John Ortiz, great actor. You might have seen him recently in the Apple TV show Bad Monkey or The Madness, which is a Netflix show right now. We were fortunate to get him to do the on-camera narration, and it was written by Joe Posnanski, just probably the best sports writer working today, author of Baseball 100 and Why We Love Baseball. And so getting him to write that narration, working with him, and then having the narrator with John Ortiz, those were new things that I'd kind of wanted to do before, and it was pretty awesome to be able to do it in this film.
You mentioned travel, Mark, and I'm sure each film, you have to travel somewhat, whether it be to even a film festival for a screening and that sort of thing. Was this the most you've traveled for a film that you were involved with, or?
No, probably not, only because, again, only interviewing 5 different people. That said, Dick's across the country in Brooklyn. Peggy was in Philadelphia. John Thorne's in Catskill, New York. Bill Madden's somewhere in Florida. And Bob Kendrick in Kansas City. So in that regard, and there was a lot of trips back and forth. I'm in Seattle, so going all the way across the country. So a lot of visits with Dick over the course of a couple of years. Towards the end, he was kind of like, "Look, I'm excited to see you, but I thought we were done with this." Mileage wise, maybe, but as far as number of trips, probably less than in films past.
Time to hear from one of our great sponsors, but Sports Card Nation will be right back after that.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.
Let's go! You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast.
Dick, for you, was this, with this process with the film, did you do more traveling? Was it something you had to get accustomed to, or no?
Well, it depends on what traveling. If it was for leisure, I did a
Yeah.
lot of that, and I think for any project, for sure. I mean, the screenings, really. I mean, that's
Yeah.
which I thought delightful to, number one, get the reaction of the actual people that the movie was aimed at, and the question and answer period afterwards. I always loved those.
Yeah.
So it was all enjoyable, and I got to meet the president of the Negro League well, not Hall of Fame, but Negro League Museum,
Yeah.
and really liked him because he said some nice things about my work. And he said exactly the way I felt was doing that. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to shake his hand and give him a hug.
Yeah, no doubt. That's Bob Kendrick, an alumnus of this podcast. He's been on. Dick, you've seen the hobby through the years, through your lens, through the general lens. Has kind of your thoughts as how, the hobby's obviously changed, so like everything in 40, 50, 60 years. Has this experience of doing the film with Mark changed how you view the hobby, or not necessarily?
Well, but the only thing that I see is that there is more art, and Topps is really doing. I started it with them when they contacted me after Don Rush, and I did some projects with them. But there were a lot of young artists who were called on, and therefore what I had set out to achieve, I accomplished, and that was to. I just think that baseball imagery began with paintings, with drawings, especially the color ones, and it's back. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's true, because I've had 10 of the 20 Topps 2020 project artists on the podcast as interview guests, and I'd say 80% of them, when I asked them, and some of them weren't necessarily hobby people, but full bore, but most of them, a high percentage of them, gave credit to you as an inspiration for what they did for the 2020 project. Did you, I know they came on the podcast and said that. Do you get that from artists that will reach out to you and say, thank you, Mr. Perez, for, kind of being the pioneer, if you will, in this genre, and, making it possible for us to be now involved? Do you get much kind of, kudos and things? Not that you necessarily need them. Your work speaks for itself, but do you get that sometimes?
Yeah, especially during trips that I took for the screenings and doing signing. There would be a couple of artists who are active now in the sport art, and thank me. So yes,
Yep, as they should. Mark, you collect with your son. It's part of the film. You show that. Has that changed? Has the process of making this film even changed how you collect with your own son?
Yeah, I would say we're just, he's still into it, and so we just probably do it a little bit more because than we had prior. And then my own personal kind of tastes, I have started collecting a lot more Dick Perez stuff, just because I've just become so much more appreciative and a fan, even the more as we've gone on. So, when I first started this, I didn't know anything about the Perez Steel art postcards. I knew the Diamond Kings from when I collected, and which I still love, but I fell in love with the Perez Steel art postcard series, and so I've started collecting autographed versions of those, and so that would be the biggest thing for me personally, is just trying to surround my office here with more of Dick's work.
There you go. Dick, you mentioned some of the Q&A and meeting some of the fans of your work, myself included in that. Does that surprise, maybe you're not surprised, but does the amount of people surprise you? Is it reinvigorating? Kind of talk about that effect on yourself when someone says to you, hey, you're the reason for this, or you're you did this for me in the hobby. You changed the hobby for me. Obviously it makes you feel good. I mean, that goes without saying, but even does that, I know you've slowed down a little bit as you've gotten older. Has that been sort of reinvigorating, or and are you getting more of that than you even anticipated? Like, I'm sure you know some of the impact, but has it surprised you?
Yeah, I'm getting more of that than I anticipated, basically because of the movie I got to meet followers. But I didn't really expect that there was a mass of people out there who collected and still have diamond, grown men and women, I hope, that collected cards too. But yeah, to answer your question, it's been overwhelming.
It's incredible, and you did a great job, Mark, with not only showing Dick the artist, but right, Dick the husband, and Dick the human, and just that human element, and you did such a fine job with that. Does that happen naturally, or is that something that you have to sort of try to do as a filmmaker, or a little of both, maybe?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of both that, you've got to know what kind of movie you're making, first of all. So, going into it with an idea and then being ready to explore and be surprised by things. There's a thread in the film covering Dick's relationship with his mom that I think is really, in many ways, the heart of the film. And that wasn't something that we hadn't talked about that. And it was maybe midway through making the film where I just realized that maybe there was something there, and then I pursued that, and that ended up being an important part of the film. And then I think there's also, documentary in many ways is autobiographical, even when, in this case, like I'm not, a subject of the film or anything like that, but we make as filmmakers the decisions for what interests us and what inspires us. And I think Dick is somebody that, at least myself and many can aspire to have a life like his, from a creative standpoint, the decisions that he makes, the relationship with his wife, I hope to have that same with my wife. So those things kind of make their way into the film when I'm directing it, because that's what I'm attracted to and that's what I'm inspired by. So, yeah, so I think like going in, there's the things that that are interesting to me, and I want those things to be in there. I would hope that finds a wider audience too, and other people can appreciate that. But there's an aspect of that is just selfish. It's what I want to explore.
And for you, Dick, you're the subject of the film. I mean, for many years, right? I mean, people knew who you were, but like you were more behind the scenes, let's say, doing the work, and then we see the finished product. Was it difficult with this film, like, getting more personal and sort of letting that veil down to talk more about, you as a person, a husband, a son, and everything else like that? Was it easy to do? You just never really had to do it before, or was it kind of guarded where you didn't want to give away all the secrets per se?
No, I think it was a natural feeling that I had about life and about how, I have figured out why I have succeeded as an illustrator, artist, painter, whatever, when many don't. And to me, the fortuity of my subject matter plays a big part in the popularity of my. You had a subject that you had a person who may like to collect art, but then also likes to collect baseball player pictures. And that was something that I didn't know right away, but figured it out when talking to other artists, and they're asking or writing about success. So to me, subject matter is important. You are in the painting when you choose a subject matter that you have a greater love for, and it's the way you do it and the way enthusiasm with which you to create new ways of looking at a portrait. All those things are inspired by the subject matter.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, another reminder, the movie is out today, The Diamond King. Great film. Again, I saw the version at last year's National. Probably close to that, but it's not exactly the same. There's some editing touches on there. But go out. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a hobby fan, a Diamond Kings fan, a Dick Perez fan, a Marq Evans director fan. Go out and watch that movie today. It's probably on a lot of different platforms. Search The Diamond King. I'm sure it will come up. And let me know if you've seen it, or if you see the finished version, let me know what you think. If you saw an earlier version and the finished version, let me know kind of, a comparison between the two. But great having Marq Evans and Dick Perez on the show today. Guess what? That's only the first half. We're going to have them back next week for the second half of our interview to keep these interviews at 30, 40 minutes long. So if you enjoyed this week's episode, I hope you did. I think you'll enjoy next week's as well. So we're going to have our Hobbies of the People announcer of the week, some closing thoughts, and wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
This is your pal Val from NASCAR Radio. Never forget, the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
Hi, I'm Isaac Alpert, a longtime card collector and the co-founder of the Penny Sleever. My wife and I started the Penny Sleever with a simple premise in mind: to offer collectors top quality supplies at fair prices. We offer a full range of hobby supplies and we'll get them to you fast. Whether you're looking for a 260-point magnetic for that oversized patch card or a slew of semi-rigids for your next PSA submission, the Penny Sleever has you covered. Shop now at thepennysleever.com and use the promo code SCNation to get 10% off your first order. That's SCNation for 10% off at thepennysleever.com. The Penny Sleever. Top quality supplies, fair prices.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.